as opposed to just looking at the politics of this year in a bubble, which makes no sense. Shane, I see you have your views on that. I want us to espouse the tradition of Sankofa, which literally means go back and get it, and see what is it in the past that has helped us or helped this year to manifest the way that is done. So in articulating the present, we can forecast into the future. So I want to start off by asking, two parties in Trinidad and Tobago, people are saying for the most part, what are some of the things that have led us back to this? I'll start with you, Shane.
The other day, I spent a week or so in Jamaica, and Jamaica is larger than Trinidad, twice the size of Trinidad in terms of population. And they have a two-party system there, strictly two-party. They see red, they see orange, they see green. And that can be done in Jamaica because they don't have the race issue. They more have a class issue that has improved over the years. And it's good to see when countries across the Caribbean who are homogeneous, can improve in their class relations and their politics. Trinidad seems to be a little bit different in terms of we have a diverse society. We have different classes, different races, different levels of population. And what we've seen ourselves come back down to is back to basics. And back to basics always isn't the best thing, but back to basics makes it a little bit simpler for us to understand what the population is thinking if the politicians are listening to the population. So we talk that there's no COP, there's no ILP, there's no nothing else except for UNC and PNM. And sooner or later, I think there might be no UNC, because you have you sit down and you ask yourself, why has the PNM been able to survive since 1956 to 2016, which is a 60-year period? And that has to do with foundation, it has to do with culture, it has to do with traditions, it has to do with structure, it has to do with education. And I was fortunate sometime last week to read a book that spoke about the moorings of the PNM, where the PNM really started off as a movement. It was the TEIA at one point in time, Teacher in Education Something Association, and then it morphed into the People's National Movement. But it's cultural, and I think the UNC has to understand that the opposition's history from 1956 to now has been sort of a flip-flop and up and down. It has been a roller coaster historically.
And I'm going to pause on that roller coaster because I'm listening to you and all I'm hearing is that there might not be a UNC in a little while. But looking at the local government elections and looking at the general elections, when people show that visual graphic, there's a lot of yellow that you see on the map. But before you answer it, I want to bring in Amilcar, and because I see you writing some notes furiously.
Yes. No, I just as a student in me still. So well, a number of things. Two-party system is not really an anomaly throughout the world. In fact, in the United States, we have seen the continuity of the Democrats and the Republicans. In the United Kingdom, what was before the Tories and the Whigs, the Labour Party in the past 100 years would establish itself as the second opposition party versus the Conservatives, and we see the Conservative Lib Dem coalitions from time to time. It happens in Australia, it happens in South Africa, and definitely throughout the Caribbean with the majority Labour parties, so many of them have the same identities, but with two parties from different bases and unions from which they emerge. So a two-party system is not as poisonous sometimes as we think, but Dr. Mohammed did establish an important point for us to consider in terms of when the ethnic composition of society allows ethnic bases from two distinct parties, well, some problems may be more pronounced here. And we see, well, for those who are honorary Guyanese, but just Caribbean citizens on the whole, would appreciate that in Guyana is also a very close society to Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the ethnic composition in Guyana, right? But we have to look at what is the utility of the two-party system. That is the question. Now, I argue, we have always have this trust for a third force, but I think we need a second force. In terms of Eric Williams, people like to underscore, was also the end of an era of very plural politics, which would have shaped the self-governance period pre-independence. The PNM established itself as the dominant political force. So Genesis doesn't begin there. The country's history is much longer than 1956. And the PNM had a particular type of, dare I say, authoritarian structure, top-down leadership, but it has authoritarian character to it, but also engaging elite classes within the society and aspirational classes who would acquire it through education and mobility to govern, and those who best fit the fit-to-rule logic. What we have not seen is ideological difference between the parties, and that is how all parties are really the same party because they are socially conservative and welfareist. Growing up in a developing world country, it's hard not to say we need public hospitals and public education compared to Paul Ryan in the United States suggesting that he should privatize Medicare. That idea wouldn't fly, that you have to spend exorbitant fees to go in Mount Hope General Hospital here in Trinidad, right? We campaign on hospitals and roads. So in that way, I think there's no ideological difference between the parties. We campaign as better managers of the economy and personal integrity. I win thief like you, and I could manage the economy better. We actually don't debate fiscal policies. We campaign on CVs, right? These persons are best suited to manage the economy. And that we very much have a one-party system with two different identities.
That brings me back to culture and structure. And you were saying about them, Shane?
Yeah, I was, Amilcar said that, the PNM had this authoritarian kind of structure where they ruled from the top down. But there was also a level of respect for authority and a level of respect for the leadership. And, we've seen it happen generation after generation. You count the leaders of the PNM and you saw that even if, and he's right, even if their CVs didn't match, the fact that they became the leaders garnered them a certain level of respect. And that is something that their followers, their base supporters understood. But their structures also, like you go to General Council in the PNM and there are ordinary members of the PNM who are sitting in General Council who have been, through a delegate system, been appointed to address the head table that says, you can't do this, or you can do this, or we don't agree. There's a level of understanding within the PNM where they take their policies straight to the ground, to their people, and their people has an ability or an opportunity to say yea or nay. But what we've seen as well is that the PNM has been able over the years to redefine itself. On election night 2015, you heard Dr. Rowley talk about he was going to try to make the PNM more diverse and to find a greater diverse outlook than what it was accustomed to over the years. And we've seen him trying to keep to his word with his recent appointments of ministers and that kind of thing, because he's trying to broaden the base and broaden the attractiveness of the PNM to the greater society. And there are a lot, and I'll put it out there are a lot of diverse people, there are a lot of non-Afro people, there are a lot of Indians, a lot of, what we call the Cocopayals, the Syrians. There's a lot of people who have gravitated towards that style of politics and that style of the PNM because it comes across as being a little more structured and a little more intellectual. And that is where class and race comes in, and that's where the UNC seems to be faltering. And the UNC built its platform, Mr. Pandey built the UNC on a culture of national unity and being able to change. I mean, he started that movement for changing the face rather than an Indian and an African party, changing that outlook and making it a party that was all-inclusive and all-embracing. That is what his platform started off in Aranguez. And we saw coming out of the UNC over the 25-year period that there were very much high-ranking members of the UNC, frontliners of the UNC that were not of an Indian race background, which today it seems to have stagnated himself in its incapacity and incapability of attracting new diverse faces rather than rather it has kept the old diverse faces. And too much of the old is becoming boring for the population and unattractive.
But some people would say that this is not necessarily a matter of attracting new people of different ethnicities, because people are saying that, well, I've heard that it's the same faces regardless of ethnicity. And while there may be some good intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
In terms of the UNC?
That's Tony Blair.
I agree, you know, I want to agree with you on that, because I also heard somebody say, and I quote that person, the PNM likes bright, as in the PNM loves bright people, and they will go for bright people who can make a difference in their governments, in their governance, and in their policies. The UNC, on the other hand, seems to be intimidated by bright people. And I throw that into their garden and say, here, water your plants and see what grows.
Talk to me and I will talk.
That's good. Well, I will make a individual critique of each one. But what I do know, however, in multiracial democracies, all political entities have to manifest a representation of the national. Whether it be a private banking business that always have the racially ambiguous baby, the Afro-Creole brown daddy, and an Indian mother, right? And that is why there's the mythological Douglas Prime Minister or a Douglas party I've been hearing since I've been born, right? So in that way, we all understand where there's anxiety. In fact, that's why the Barack Obamas of the world resonate. Those who seem to push us into a, hopefully, post-racist society, but they embody a kind of post-racial identity. And in that way, all parties have the tassa drumming and the Malik kind of drumming going on that they see at all times. But what we have also come to understand that public relations does not match itself to policy and the distribution of resources. And when in fact, in spite of all the bright, intelligent, attractive, especially young people that they get to give us that image of diversity, what we have not seen is cross-race politics around LGBTQ youth, lesbian and gay youth. Those are Afro and Indo-Trinis too. And why they don't get any love, right? When it comes to issues around the decriminalization of certain things that are identified as drugs right now in this part of the world, we're not seeing a dialogue around that. We're not seeing progressive agendas on how we deal with technology and participation, when other Caribbean countries have gone into a much longer way around coding literacy as part of the expansion of Wi-Fi, not just for Wi-Fi, but to be creators of content in a digital age and not just consumers. And these are cross-race, cross-class solidarity building things that have nothing to do with an attractive Afro-Indo-Chinese person. They say we are diverse, but they are real policies. So on one level, I need to feel that I can identify with a party when I see the manifesto and the candidates walk across the stage. I understand that symbolic shift that I must make in my mind. But the substantive shift that I must make in my mind is that the policies and the resources must flow into the Afro-Indo-Chinese Syrian communities equitably and fairly. And once you have unfair housing practices, that affects groups. It affects certain communities where people live in larger geographies. And that is why Indians or Africans feel affected in Trinidad, because they deny housing from a particular constituency, and we also live in clusters. Not every place is as diverse as a Tunapuna or St. Joseph where I live, where you have, or Princeton. So that is the kind of dialogue that we have. And I think it is unsatisfactory in 2016 to continue to see the Ganjimi denial calypso manifest itself in candidates, but I don't feel a real mobilization that happens with it. And in fact, it leads to a false national narrative about unity oftentimes, and not a greater investment in actually that we could be different in a unity as well.
So we want to continue with that narrative in the rest of it. We take a short pause. When we return, we continue this conversation. Stay with us. Now, gentlemen, we are in a piece of the conversation, and Shane, I know you wanted to pick up from it, but I also want to throw into the pot of things to consider and elements. Male privilege. patriarchal society, how does that impact on some of the things that we're dealing with? But Shane, even before I threw that there, you were saying that there's something that America said that resonated with you.
Yeah, what I label what America said earlier about all of the things that he labeled, politics of convenience. We've become politicians of convenience in this country, and only when it suits my own political agenda will I pick it up and run with it. And unless it doesn't, and it doesn't give me an opportunity to move forward and to go up and to attain some level of popularity, then I go in and push it behind me and put it behind me and under the carpet. But there are very few political risk takers in this country. Two of them stands out to me, Pastor Pandey and Patrick Manning. They were both press boys, they were both on the political divide. Mr. Pandey did say that Mr. Manning, after he died, he was not his enemy, he was his political enemy, not his personal one. And they were political risk takers, each in their own way. Mr. Pandey took a chance to build, to walk away from the NAR and to build an institution, and he said things. He talked about the parasitic oligarchy, he called people pseudo-racist. He took chances that he knew that people want. He did not just say what people wanted to hear. He said things that people didn't want to hear. Him putting on the red beret, he will always be remembered for those things. Mr. Manning calling 2 snap elections. People, I know that there are persons sitting in the current administration saying that they were wondering whether or not Mr. Manning had gone crazy because he had taken political chances that would have either led to his rise or his demise. Where are our political risk takers in our current political system?
Are we able to take risks now with a system that beats down the risk taker, especially in a system where people are given a sense of power, be it real or false, every 5 years? So I need to appease my base so that they vote me in for another term, so then possibly I can get the change.
But the base isn't the ones that are going to win you an election. I always say, like the Americans has 270 votes to get to the presidency. You need to cross 400,000 in Trinidad and Tobago. And unless your political party is capable of crossing 400,000 people, and that 400,000 mark, you ain't going into government. And how are you going to attract the extra 275,000 people out there that are just looking on, hanging their heads and stooping when the day comes? You have to be able to start talking intellect. You are supposed to be able to start addressing all real issues in this country, a lot of which Amilcar just raised. You need to start addressing people in this country. But at the end of the day, I am not saying people are afraid of change, right? And I said, I wrote it last week. I got a very loud message from Mrs. Vicessa a few weeks ago, which said, yes, we need change, but change doesn't come overnight. Miss Lady, the day for change is today. We have a population that is, 1, politically stagnated, and 2, people are hungry for something different. And if they're not satisfied with the current administration and those who are in power now, they are looking for an alternative. And if you cannot provide that alternative, it is your party to fail, not the current one. People don't vote in a party. They vote out a party, or they maintain the status quo because they will work with what they have. And political trust, honesty, and decency is something that needs to come back into our political system for people to feel a level of attractiveness, a level of connect. They need to feel that what they think, their views, their opinions matter. And if you are not creating that forum and that opportunity, for example, taking FATCA as a real example, people they're going to stop listening.
I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that, Amilcar. Just have to remind people that the phone lines are open, 622-4141, extension 4. But in terms of, you spoke about public relations versus policy, and speaking to the issues are one thing while outside. But Paul Kings Douglas, he says that many people start a story different ways. Some people say once upon a time, some people say quick crack. He said politicians, many times they start a story by saying, if elected. So I'm wondering, how do we take that and deal with those issues while holding the reins?
Well, I would start a story in this economy. Globally, what we have seen, for example, in the global north, what we call the developed world or whatever, they have, like Barack Obama, he has improved the performance of the economy and reduced unemployment. However, income has stagnated and inflation has also risen. And that has happened in Europe. In fact, that helped facilitate the Brexit vote. It helped create the context for the rise of a Trump. But it's also happening here, where austerity has been, and the profits of austerity, even though the Prime Minister has rejected taking IMF loan conditions to take a loan, he has already solicited the advice of world global financial organizations at the beginning of his term.
But he says that they're always there, so in trying to take in front before they take behind. But I ask you to keep on that point. We have Pleasantville on the line. Hello, good morning, Pleasantville.
Hello, morning, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, morning. I heard one of your gentlemen there on my right there speak about the Mr. Manning, made reference to Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandey, what their stance was during their career. But what I would like to find out is that when you look at the level, the quality of politicians today that is gracing our parliament and the behavior, mainly the behavior of some of them that are there to set an example with their leadership. And I'm speaking about the walkouts that we are seeing in Parliament, and we are looking at people who are sitting in Parliament that have allegations against them that is out in the public domain. What do we say to the country when this is the type of politicians that we are being presented with? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pleasantville.
He's making a very good point, and I agree with him. One, I was trying to explain to another gentleman, a young guy who didn't understand the whole issue of the walkout, right? Now, there's a difference between walking out and another issue of getting put out. And since it is that we like to claim that we have a strict Westminster system in this country, which I don't totally agree with, I will explain. One, in the Westminster system, when your leader is put out of the parliament, it is tradition that the troops walk out together with the leader, because the leader leads the pack. That's one. But I agree as well with him that this walkout thing is becoming mundane, frustrating, disgusting, disrespectful to the people's taxpayers' dollars that are paying you. And even if it is that your leader gets put out of the parliament and there's the tradition of everybody walking out, it should say that you are not planning, your strategy and your planning is ineffective. You should be prepared that if I get put out today, boys, here what's going on. You all, whether it is 5, 6 of you, need to stay back and debate this thing and go down to the wire with it, but hold down our position and see what it says. And we can negotiate from the outside, just like they did in the room when they were sitting down the other day, right? They could have negotiated, and they could have reached some sort of agreement, and they could have, through their debating skills, raised the issues that were affecting or that they were objecting the government, objecting with to the population at that forum. 1, 2, yes, I agree that there are fellas inside of there who have allegations against them. And that is an indictment on the leadership that chose them when there was advice to the leadership that those persons were no longer attractive and would not satisfy the population, the greater population who you were looking for to get you to 400,000. And unless the parties who have, and I'm not saying it's one or the other, it's both sides, unless the party's leadership and party structure are prepared to face facts and agree that there are boys in there who have serious stains on their names and the population has rejected, then politics in this country has gone down the drain.
I want to ask you, from your personal experience, why did you get into politics on the UWI campus?
Well, good question. I will answer that in a little while. But all action is political for me. And we are battling for space. You know, I see, I was in competition for ideas about, they only have 2 seats on an interviewer every time you speak. and what kind of ideas are we formulating to the public. And I became very aware, as much as I was in activism, I had this idea once upon a time, to use Paul Gaines Douglas. I had an idea that movements could pressure persons who make decisions, and we elect politicians to represent the ideals of our movement. But then I realized that movements cannot mobilize their communities around every issue. And there are many micro issues politicians have to take up, which are connected to a wider network of a bigger decision.
Yes.
And in that way, we need to elect people with power to make those many small decisions as well as the big ones, and to help represent our movements. So I don't see myself as an expert in a field. I never see myself as a political careerist, but I see myself as part of a movement and serving in different capacities. And that is how I came across to the idea of acquiring and accumulating and possessing titular power from a title to represent the ideals of a movement to which I belong.
I see that your thinking has changed over some time, because I remember you relating to someone, this age of information that we live in, that originally they asked, you said that you, specific one, I, the ninth letter of the alphabet, you were going to make the world a better place.
Yes.
And coming back to you a little while later, the person asked, did you still believe that with that kind of clarion call, mountaintop, slow motion theme music playing? And you said that you were working on being the best person that you could be, and the world would be a better place for you being in it because of that. Do you find people...
Wait, that was good though.
So we're going to take a break, and I want to ask whether or not people are still being drawn into politics because of what they see now. Welcome back to Good Morning Trinidad and Tobago. Amilcar Sanatan, Shane Mohammed are with us speaking about politics near and far. We want to speak about the rise of Trump and what we're seeing in former colonizing powers, but we're keeping it right here, because I was asking, what is there? Because we've started speaking about leadership and what it is people see. The other day we played an explainer, because sadly it's still so true in Parliament, Dick Hickson, but what do people see that inspires them to say, okay, I can make a change through that title, through politics?
Sure. Dickie, I just want to say thanks for these questions. It's good. I'll work, right? So, all right. When it comes to thinking about the political process, the ascendance of a Trump is so important for us. Now, Fidel Castro is dead, and Trump is the next president of the United States of America. So we're in a very interesting time for the world in the Caribbean and the Caribbean in the world, according to Susan Craig.
Remind, because there's a Chinese curse, you live in interesting times.
Yes, so we live in interesting times under Chinese conditions. Now, when we think about ourselves, young people, we reject the two evilism, you know? Less of the two evils, more of the two evils, and we try to run away from that choice. What we need to see ourselves is to not call Donald Trump a fascist. To call him a fascist, I think, leads into a narrative where we think is, as an individual, he represents some wrong. Now, it is weird that an anti-establishment candidate is a millionaire, right? And went through a majority party. What we need to understand is that he was elected. And what we need to do is to have competing politics. In the United States, we have seen how the Democratic Party undermined Bernie Sanders, and they undermined his class message for the attractiveness of a party to show this diverse. We understand that Donald Trump is actually America, and Barack Obama was a stray from America being America. We have seen the positives of his message, where he says that wars abroad and our business and everyone's else own has had economic hardships for us at home. But we know it is not anti-imperialism, we know it is American isolationism. Why does that matter to us? Sunshine newspaper this weekend, Jack Warner said we should probably have a Trinidad exit from the CARICOM. There are enough quarters in the JLP right now in Jamaica mobilized to think about reconditioning their role in the Caribbean community. And Trumpism is in the Caribbean, because in St. Lucia we had a prime minister who on the election campaign was promising to make the acquisition of US visas much easier for citizens. Getting local passports are very difficult. Getting US visas, clearly he has a telephone line to someone else. What does that show? that young people throughout the world need to identify what are their politics and get actively involved in the political process. Not enough to sit outside. A decision will be made whether 5 people vote or 1.5 people vote, 5 million people vote, 400,000 vote. And we need to see ourselves as part of that. So it's not even about getting young people into office. I think that was the trick. We got young people into office and realized that they were walking on the tightrope of politics. I did a paper on this, right? We interviewed young politicians, and the young youth party, they always have a problem with the public relations officer. And they sent a press release and had to get approved 2 weeks after with the issue not hot. So young people in youth arms struggle in major political parties. So we don't just need young people by age. What we need is our young idea about politics and our way about going about it, which is not one-manism, which is more collaborative, which is definitely more democratic, not authoritarian, engage with social media, and not the management of information in the old way, but actively having dialogues and debates. And it's okay to say you're wrong and having flexible opinions that change over time. And I would, as someone from the Social Student Conference, an ideological difference which puts me to the left of the very right-wing, austerity, socially conservative, Caribbean, West Indian, blah, 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 colonial reinventions and complexion that we have been playing games with.
So I wanted to bring some of those elements in just now to say how could it be done different. But Shane, before that, I see you nodding, and a lot of what America's saying is resonating with you.
He's right. At the end of the day, you know, he's put it in a very sophisticated way, and we've gotten young people involved in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago for the purpose of getting them involved and for putting them there as window dressing. And, you know, he's very right that young people need to figure out what is their politics, what are their policies, what do they want, what do they look forward to. It too often, you know, there's no graduation, there's no training ground, there's no schooling for young people to get involved. Of course, you know that the Heliconia Foundation exists. We know that several persons coming out of the Heliconia Foundation are now senators in the government and they are ministers of government, right? What is the alternative? Where is it in the UNC? And I have to bring it back down to comparing the PNM and the UNC because we're back to a two-party system, right? And I'm not going to talk about other political parties that are not major anymore. But there's this level of sycophancy that exists that people will probably accuse me of having been a part of in the past. I will say that was the past, right? But there's this level of sycophancy that generates a lack of policy, a lack of strategy, a lack of ideology, a lack of creativity, and a very important one, a lack of innovation. And if our young people in this country are lacking all of those things in politics, then they are creating a vacuum and a gap for sycophancy to reign. And if you cannot question the policies of your party or the policies of your leader and agree to disagree or collaborate, as Milka rightly says, then what is your position in society? It means that you are just sitting there like little puppets on a window and smiling and saying, yes, or that's all you're doing. Our young people need to get very much involved into the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. And politicians need to stop being intimidated by young people. Whether they're bright, whether they're not bright, whether they are interested, you need to stop being intimidated by, and I'm going to break it down again. The UNC needs to stop being so intimidated by young people because the PLM has proved, right, time and time again, that they find ways and means to bring their young people in.
So let me ask how you do that, and I don't know. I see Shane point at you when he said the PNM. I don't know.
No. I didn't mean to point at it, but I meant, you know, the PNM has done their homework, and they've been, even 2015, they came out with a difference that I like to dub a politics of sexy. They put people on the platform that the young people can identify with in terms of looks, in terms of gender, in terms of appearance, in terms of intellect, in terms of way they speak. They gravitated towards that platform, whether it was the Shamfa Kujos, whether it was the Ayana Webster Roy, whether it was the Sarah Budu, whether it was the Stuart Young and the Faris Arawi. Compare all of those names I just called to what was on the alternative platform, and you will get Suraj Rambachan and Rudal Munilal.
But can we say that is still a bit of tokenism?
Yeah, no and yes, because what you've seen is, why is the Heliconia Foundation so successful? Why is the Heliconia Foundation able to host various forums and functions and platforms for young people within the PNM to have discussion and debate and to graduate. They always say the Senate is a training ground for young politicians to start off. I have experienced it, others have experienced it in the past. But other than that, what is happening now?
And we continue that question, and we want to give Amilcar some time to speak. We also want to say good morning to Hazel Brown, who has been instrumental in dealing with women in politics and organizing that out of a party system. But Maruga is on the line. Hello, Maruga.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I want to say that your two panels there, they are quite refreshing. I normally walk away when I hear these political analysts speak on your program because it becomes redundant with what they're saying. It's the first time I'm hearing these persons actually speaking to the people as not just numbers, but as people with thoughts and ideologies. And I have no doubt if this country can produce men like those two, we are in safe hands.
Thank you so much, Maruga. Yes, ma'am. It seems as though you had a Dear Diary moment, but I am wondering, though, in terms of how do we wrap this, I want to get your thoughts on this, Amilcar, but how do we wrap that organization versus mobilization in a kind of Kwame Ture sort of way?
Yo, Kwame Ture, very important West Indian and Trinidadian more specifically, locally Carmichael. Organize. You know, there's unsexy work to activism. You know, you mentioned Hazel Brown. A lot of the work that she did in the Housewives Association of Trinidad and Tobago dealt with consumer rights and affairs, and as much as that helped tame capitalism and its exploitation, it was important in improving the material experiences of many women throughout Trinidad and Tobago and working class people in general. When we think about organization, it's not just membership and dues, and not just sports days and football matches where be small sweat. It's actually sitting down and collaboratively working on a press release. It's about going on in media and having a press tour and a campaign to discuss this, you want to argue it to the public. It's about sitting in and reading the policy document, the draft, and going to a consultation in local government and writing it up. It's actually going through the line minister, not doing a protest outside of parliament, but holding the state entity responsible. I think we have over 36 state enterprises in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of them have very specific mandates which you must hold accountable, like the education facilities company. So there are ways you must think about. So I believe fundamentally the process is one of political education that is central to organizing, but it's taking the thought now into action. Small high C's and low C's, that sometimes there's only 5 people that come out to mobilize, and there are important moments where there's a lot of anger, it turns into 500. And hopefully the 5,000.
And we need to have more important moments like this, so we will try to have you two refreshing young men on the set once more. Amilcar Sanatan, Shane Mohammed, thank you so much for your presence.